Okay, so we're going to do a deep dive today into something I'm sure a lot of you have seen in the headlines recently.
Yeah.
And it has to do with some shifts that we're seeing in federal law enforcement.
Right.
And we've got a really fascinating report here from Reuters that details what's going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And it looks like thousands of federal agents are being reassigned
Wow.
from agencies we've all heard of, ICE, ATF, DEA, and Homeland Security investigations.
Yeah.
And they're being pulled to focus on immigration enforcement.
That's a lot of agents.
Yeah, it's a huge shift.
It is.
So what we're going to try to dig into today is, what happens when these types of law enforcement priorities change so dramatically.
Right.
And, what are some of the things that might not be so obvious, the ripple effects.
Yeah, the unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think one of the first things that really jumps out at you from this report is just the sheer scale of it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're not talking about a handful of agents here and there.
Right.
This is a massive reallocation of resources across multiple agencies. It's really something.
Yeah, and it makes you think, where were these agents before this shift?
Exactly.
What were they doing before they were pulled for immigration enforcement?
Yeah, where was their focus?
And, the report gives some pretty stark examples.
It does.
For instance, there were agents who were previously focused on tracking down child abusers.
Oh, wow.
And now they're tasked with immigration enforcement.
That's a big change.
That's a huge change.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the skill sets of these agents and
Right.
how are they being used now?
Are they being used in the best way?
Exactly. And is this the best use of their expertise?
Yeah.
And the report also talks about Homeland Security investigators who, are experts in things like money laundering and financial crimes.
Right.
And they're now being sent to raid businesses.
I read that.
Yeah, restaurants,
Yeah.
small businesses.
Yeah.
And they're looking for unauthorized workers.
Yeah, that was something else.
It's a very different type of work
It is.
than what they were doing before.
It seems like a big shift for those people.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's not just them, right? We see agents who are working drug trafficking cases, tax fraud investigations.
Yeah, all sorts of things.
All being pulled in to focus on immigration. So it really gives you a sense of how broad this is.
It does. It really highlights how this is a top priority for the administration.
Yeah. And the report points out that this is, it's directly tied to the Trump administration's pledge to deport what they call millions and millions of criminal aliens.
Right.
So that's the stated reason for this major shift in personnel and resources.
Yeah. And they're really framing this as a national security issue.
They are.
That's the justification for this reallocation.
Right.
It's about protecting the country from threats.
And, when you see something like this, I think a lot of people listening are probably wondering, what's the consequence for other types of crime?
Right. Are we leaving ourselves vulnerable in other areas?
Exactly. Are we less safe in other ways because of this focus?
That's the big question a lot of critics are raising.
Yeah, the report mentions those concerns as well.
They're worried that this shift in focus means we have fewer resources to fight things like drug trafficking, terrorism, sexual abuse, fraud.
It's a long list.
It is. And it's all serious stuff.
It is.
So it really raises this question of, are we safer overall with this new approach?
Or is safe?
Yeah, what is safe?
And the report does a good job of making this real for people.
It does.
By, including some powerful images.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's a picture of federal officers in Maryland preparing a Filipino man for transport.
Wow.
And there's another image of agents trying to get into an apartment building in pursuit of a Honduran man.
It's a reminder that this is not just about numbers and policies.
Yeah.
This is about real people's lives.
Right. This has a real impact on individuals and communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a good example of how journalism can really bring these issues to life.
For sure.
And show the human cost of these policy decisions.
Yeah, so just to kind of recap, what we're seeing here is a huge reassignment of federal law enforcement resources towards immigration enforcement. And, the administration is saying this is about national security.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are a lot of questions being raised about what this means for other types of crime.
Yeah, and whether this is actually making us safer overall.
Right. So it's a real crossroads in terms of how we prioritize law enforcement.
Absolutely.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It does.
As these priorities shift so dramatically.
Right.
What are some of the things that we might not be seeing?
Yeah, what's happening in the shadows?
Exactly. What are the unintended consequences for different types of crime and different communities?
It's a question worth pondering for sure.
Absolutely.
Because the impact of these changes could be far-reaching.
It could be.
And we may not even fully understand them for years to come.
Yeah, it's something we'll have to keep an eye on for sure.
Definitely.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive, and thanks for walking us through all this.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure.
I always enjoy these conversations.
Me too.
It's important to stay informed about these issues.
It is.
Because they affect all of us.
They do.
So thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.